I wasn't supposed to be here. My sister's place, her life, her high-powered job in a world I'd only watched from the shadows. But when fate, or maybe desperation, thrust me into her shoes, I walked into the lion's den without a map, without armor, and definitely without a plan. Adrian Cross, the man who made billion-dollar deals feel like playground games, didn't just see employees, he saw weaknesses, and he smelled lies. Every glance from him was sharp enough to cut, yet terrifyingly magnetic. I should have run the first night he locked eyes on me. Instead, I stayed. Because even knowing the danger, even knowing the inevitable fall, I craved it, the thrill of being wanted by the man who could ruin me with a whisper, and save me with a single, dangerous smile. Part 1. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. Not in Adrian Cross's office, not in his world, not sitting at the long, polished table where his most trusted executives gathered, where deals were made and broken before the first cup of coffee had cooled. My sister had warned me once that this place was unforgiving, that Adrian didn't just see people, he dissected them, hunted their weaknesses, and exploited them without mercy. And yet, here I was, impersonating her with a reckless kind of courage that terrified me more than his reputation ever could. The first time he saw me, I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a cold, lurching jolt that made me question every step that had led me here. He didn't enter the room quietly. Adrian never did. The air shifted when he came in, heavy and deliberate, and even without looking up, I knew every head had turned toward him. The subtle scent of his cologne was intoxicating, a mixture of something sharp and warm, and it reached me before he even stood in front of me. Then he did look, and my entire body betrayed me. My pulse quickened, and I forced myself to steady my hands on the folder I held, pretending I hadn't felt the way his eyes lingered. He didn't speak immediately, just scanned the room with an intensity that was almost cruel. And then, when his gaze landed on me, a slow, calculated smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile that welcomed me. It was a smile that warned me. That promised danger. And it drew me in like gravity. I had no business wanting to look at him, to feel the thrill that raced under my ribs whenever his attention found me, yet I did. I had wanted to disappear, to vanish into the shadows, but I stayed. I couldn't help myself. "You're late," he said finally, and the calmness in his voice was far more intimidating than a shout. It carried weight, authority, and judgment. I flinched slightly, but I raised my chin. "I had unavoidable circumstances," I said, forcing my tone steady, professional, masking the tremor in my fingers. I could almost feel the invisible line between me and him shrinking, the air itself charged with expectation. He tilted his head and studied me for a long, deliberate moment, one that made it impossible not to squirm under his gaze. "I see," he said at last, and the pause afterward made my chest tighten. "Sit." I obeyed, careful to keep my posture perfect, careful to pretend I belonged here. Everything about Adrian Cross demanded respect. His reputation wasn't built on kindness, and I understood that. Every move he made in the office, every word he spoke, was a test. And he was already testing me. The first week was brutal. I learned quickly that he noticed everything, the way I hesitated on the slightest detail, the flicker of doubt in my eyes when I wasn't careful, the way my pulse betrayed me whenever he was near. He didn't speak of it, not directly. His attention was enough to keep me alert, my senses sharpened to a painful degree. And every time our eyes met across the conference room or through the glass partitions, I felt it, an electric tension that made my skin hot and my stomach knot in ways that were both thrilling and terrifying. He began assigning me tasks that were impossible, projects that seemed designed to expose my lack of experience, my inability to match the precision my sister carried naturally. And every time I stumbled, every time I nearly failed, he was there, silent but unyielding, watching me struggle. I wanted to retreat, to vanish, but something deeper, darker, compelled me to stay. I wanted to see if I could survive his scrutiny. I wanted him to notice if I did. "You're out of your depth," he said one night after a presentation nearly went off the rails, and his words were low, controlled, sharp enough to slice. My throat tightened, but I held my ground. "I'm learning," I replied, and even I could hear the tremor beneath the surface of my voice. His eyes held mine longer than necessary, and I realized then that he wasn't just assessing my professional capability. He was testing me, prodding at the edges of my composure, seeing how much I could take, how far I could be pushed before I cracked. "Some lessons can't be unlearned," he said finally, and the implication was not lost on me. Every night, when I left the office, I felt like I had run a marathon without moving my legs. My sister's life was a maze of calculated moves and hidden truths, and I was learning it piece by piece under the sharp, demanding gaze of a man who could destroy everything in seconds. And yet, with every challenge, every brush of proximity, every subtle smile, my desire for him grew, not just the desire to survive his scrutiny, but to feel his attention, to test the boundaries between fear and attraction. It started with small moments, our hands brushing as we passed documents, lingering eye contact across crowded rooms, whispered corrections that carried the weight of command. He never touched me overtly, not yet. But the presence was enough, the heat, the silent assertion of dominance, the magnetic pull that drew me closer despite my instincts screaming to run. One evening, after a particularly grueling board meeting, he called me into his office. The door closed behind me with a finality that made my stomach twist. He was standing near the window, the city lights framing him in gold and shadow. For a moment, I just looked at him, the air thick between us. Then he spoke. "You're hiding something," he said softly, and my heart stuttered. The accusation wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The weight of his certainty made it almost unbearable. "I'm committed," I said carefully, choosing words that were half-truth, half-lie. I didn't clarify what I was committed to, my deception, my survival, the magnetic pull between us, but I couldn't lie completely. He would see through it. He always did. He tilted his head, lips curling faintly. "Committed," he repeated, almost like a warning. His voice was velvet, smooth, and dangerous, and I realized that his presence alone could topple my carefully constructed defenses. The following weeks became a carefully orchestrated dance of proximity and evasion. I learned his routines, the patterns of his day, the subtle shifts in expression that revealed his thoughts. He challenged me relentlessly, pushing me to think, to act, to survive, and I rose to the occasion, not just for the work but for the unspoken game we had begun to play. A game of control, of desire, of understanding without words. There were moments when I almost confessed. When the loneliness and intensity of the secret life I had assumed threatened to crush me, I wanted to tell him everything, to unburden myself, to see if he could see the real me. But I didn't. Part of me wanted to be found out, wanted him to recognize the lie, the thrill, the danger of my audacity. Part of me feared that if he knew, the spell would be broken, the game would end, and I would be exposed, not just to him, but to the world he controlled with merciless precision. One night, the elevator doors closed behind me, and he was there. Too close, the space impossibly small, the air charged. "Why are you really here?" he asked, his voice low, a growl that made my blood run hot. I swallowed, feeling the line between truth and deception blur beyond recognition. "I'm committed," I said again, deliberately ambiguous, and he studied me, a predator and a lover wrapped into one impossibly dangerous man. Then he laughed, softly, and it reverberated in the confined space. It wasn't mocking, it wasn't cruel. It was deliberate, the sound of a man who knew power and desire could coexist dangerously, and who found that coexistence thrilling. "Reckless," he said, almost to himself, and I understood that he had already decided something irrevocable. I stayed that night, and every night after, drawn into a current that was as intoxicating as it was perilous. Every glance, every brush of skin, every whispered instruction was a test and a temptation. And as much as fear clawed at my spine, desire anchored me. I was dangerously in too deep, and Adrian Cross had no idea how far I could fall or how willingly. It was inevitable that our proximity would become unbearable, that the magnetic tension between us would ignite. And when it did, I would have to choose between survival and surrender, truth and desire, fear and the intoxicating thrill of a man who could ruin me or claim me entirely with a single, deliberate move. I didn't know how it would end. I only knew that I couldn't step away. Not now. Not ever. Part 2. The storm hit without warning. One afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox, anonymous, menacing, its subject line simple and cutting: "We know who you are." My chest seized. I could feel my heart pounding so hard I thought it would betray me, reveal the secret I had guarded so fiercely. My fingers hovered over the delete button, but I didn't. I couldn't. Adrian would notice. He always did. And he did. He appeared behind me before I could breathe properly, leaning close enough that I felt his heat press against my back. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, dangerous, calm, the kind of calm that promised reckoning. I nodded, swallowing the surge of panic and adrenaline that rolled through me, and followed him without a word. We stepped onto the rooftop terrace. The city stretched out below in a glittering expanse, indifferent to my secrets, indifferent to my fear. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stung my cheeks, but I barely noticed. Adrian's presence filled the space between us like a tangible weight, pressing, demanding, daring me to crumble. "Who are you?" he asked. Not the polite, professional version of the question. Not a test. Not a warning. Something darker, sharper, more intimate. I felt it in my chest, a thundering heartbeat that no lie could quiet. I inhaled, the wind catching my words. "I'm your sister's replacement," I confessed, the lie I had built my entire act upon finally spilling into reality. The moment the words left my lips, I saw it in his eyes, the storm of emotion he kept locked behind perfect control. Surprise, irritation, curiosity, and something I couldn't name, all colliding in a gaze that could have shattered glass. "Explain," he said, voice low and precise, not a request but a command. I told him everything. The accident that forced me to step into her shoes, the desperation, the audacity, the thrill and terror of inhabiting a life that wasn't mine. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg. I simply let the words tumble out, exposing the truth I had fought so hard to protect. He listened. And when I finished, he said nothing for a long, unbearable moment. Then he laughed. A low, soft sound that shook something in my chest. Not cruel. Not dismissive. But terrifyingly intimate. "You're reckless," he said, voice smooth, dangerous, and somehow approving. And interesting. The word wrapped around me, suffocating and electric. He stepped closer, close enough that I felt his breath, the heat radiating from him, the promise in every line of his body. "Interesting," he repeated, lips brushing my ear, and my knees threatened to give way. I should have stepped back. I should have told him it was wrong. That I was a fraud, that this was dangerous, that he had no idea what he was unleashing. But the moment stretched too long, the tension between us unbearable, and I realized that I didn't want to step back. I wanted him. I wanted this. The danger, the thrill, the impossibility of it all. He tilted my face up with one hand, fingers curling against my jaw, thumb brushing my lips. His eyes locked on mine, and I understood he could see everything. Not just the deception, not just the lies, but the fear, the desire, the vulnerability I had hidden even from myself. And yet, instead of condemning me, he leaned in, slow, deliberate, and kissed me. The kiss was everything I hadn't imagined and more. Sharp. Claiming. Unforgiving. Every nerve ending in my body ignited. My hands trembled, my pulse raced, and I realized I was utterly, irrevocably lost to him. He could ruin me, destroy me, and I would let him, because I wanted to. Needed to. Days blurred into nights, our stolen moments a dangerous game. The office became a battlefield of glances, touches, whispered corrections. He challenged me professionally and personally, testing boundaries, watching me respond, learning me in ways that terrified and thrilled me. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving under the pressure, under his attention, under his desire. Then she appeared. My sister. Unannounced. Out of nowhere, furious and indignant, ready to reclaim her life, her job, her everything. I froze, realizing the game might be over, realizing that the illusion could crumble in an instant. She saw me, and I could see the recognition, the betrayal in her eyes. She knew. She had found me out. Adrian stood beside me, calm, unreadable, and I felt a jolt of fear and anticipation. My sister's accusations filled the office, sharp and chaotic, but Adrian didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply stepped closer to me, presence absolute, dominance undeniable. You're staying, he said finally, his voice low, deliberate, leaving no room for negotiation. Because the truth is, I don't want her. I want you. I felt my chest tighten, my heart hammering against my ribs. He wasn't speaking in hypotheticals. He wasn't testing me. He was claiming me, fully, without hesitation, and the reality of it made me dizzy. Desire, fear, relief, and adrenaline surged through me all at once. My sister's voice faltered as she realized she had no claim over him, no power over me. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving only us, the silence between us charged, alive, dangerous. Adrian's hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing my skin with precision, intimacy, and threat all at once. I could ruin you, he whispered, voice low, dangerous, and I felt the thrill of it course through me. Or I could make you mine completely. I swallowed, feeling the truth in his words, in his presence, in the heat that pressed against me. Then make me yours, I whispered, surrendering, not out of weakness but choice. Desire isn't weakness. It's clarity, and in that moment, I understood it fully. The weeks that followed were a delicate, perilous balance of revelation, secrecy, and seduction. He taught me how to wield power subtly, how to manipulate perception without betraying the truth. I became both accomplice and partner, learning the rules of a dangerous game that could destroy us or bind us irreversibly. Every touch, every glance, every whispered command was a lesson in desire and survival. One night, alone in his office after everyone else had gone, he approached me silently. The city sprawled beneath the windows, a glittering expanse of lights that didn't care about the world we had built between us. He pressed me against the desk, fingers digging lightly into my waist, lips brushing my ear. You're mine, he murmured, the words both claim and promise. Yes, I breathed, surrendering completely, knowing that I had chosen this, that I had stepped willingly into his orbit, into the danger, the thrill, the storm we had created. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, breathing, aching, and burning under his gaze. In the weeks and months that followed, the world outside continued, indifferent, unyielding. Deals were made, power shifted, threats arrived and dissipated like shadows. But in the center of it all, we had our truth, our secret, our danger, and our desire. The wrong twin had been hired, yes, but the right one had been chosen. Not because of deception, but because of resilience, audacity, and the magnetic pull that existed between us. We moved through our lives carefully, dangerously, completely. I was no longer the hidden sister, no longer the fraud. I was me. And Adrian Cross had claimed me entirely. Our passion was no longer illicit in the sense of temptation, it was real, raw, consuming, and absolute. We survived. Or perhaps we didn't, in the conventional sense. The world could crumble around us. Scandal could erupt, rivals could strike, consequences could fall like thunder from a clouded sky. But in that storm, on that terrace, in that office, under the weight of his hands and the intensity of his gaze, I realized something irrevocable. I was his. Not borrowed, not hidden, not accidental. Fully, dangerously, irrevocably his. And I wanted it. Wanted him. Needed him. Needed the danger, the desire, the risk, the thrill of walking hand in hand through a fire we had both chosen. I had stepped into his world, and I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I was alive in a way I had never been before. We kissed again, slow, claiming, dangerous, tasting and knowing and proving. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath us, and I realized that the wrong twin had been hired but the right one had been found, chosen by the only man who could match me, challenge me, and consume me entirely. And I didn't just accept it. I embraced it. I let go of fear. I let go of pretense. I let go of everything that had held me back. For once, I didn't just survive. I lived. And I did it with him, in the storm, in the danger, in the fire. And in the end, I understood the truth. Adrian Cross didn't just want me to play his game. He wanted me entirely, and I wanted him just as completely. The world could burn. Consequences could fall. Secrets could unravel. But we would face it together. And perhaps, in that dangerous, thrilling, consuming way, we would endure. Or perhaps we would destroy each other. Either way, it was ours, and I was finally, undeniably, irrevocably his. Another 15 minutes, gone just like that. If you're already craving the next episode, don't fight it, there's plenty more billionaire chaos where this came from. Hit that follow, and meet me in the next story. Trust me, it only gets juicier from here.